Hi, thanks for joining us on the Legacy podcast. Well, thanks for joining me on the Legacy podcast and all of us who have been watching along and listening along so far in this journey. You and I know each other reasonably well. That's not always true of the guests that I've had on here. But I am absolutely confident we're going to discover all sorts of things about your journey, about how, about your experiences that are new to me and are absolute gold, I'm sure. Let's start where we've started a lot of these, and that is to ask you, how would you describe yourself? So, not interested in you saying, I do this, I do that, but what kind of person are you? How would you describe yourself?
Yeah, I would say a follower of Jesus, a husband, a son, a brother, a friend to loads of people, someone who loves family and community. It's so important. And ultimately, I think, love seeing people step into, realize all that God is calling them to be. Like, to facilitate that, to speak that, to be around people to see that happen. That's someone who gets excited by seeing what God is doing.
Yeah.
So,
and what do you do for fun? If you were going to spend a day doing fun stuff, what would be in that?
A few things: family or friends, people. I think I'm a people person. I'm an extrovert. Love doing things with people. So time with friends, away, doing something. It could be the activity is secondary, but having the right people together is the dream. Good food is always a win. I'm Indian naturally. I'm wired around food, and I guess if particularly a good game of cricket or badminton, depending on the weather allows. Or me and my wife have got into board games, so we're building quite the collection at the moment.
Really.
So board games at home.
Favorite so far?
So far, I think recently it's been this game called Acropolis.
Oh yeah.
Where you build you build the city and you score the highest points with the amount of tiles you have or whatever.
Yeah.
Strategic, fun, quick games.
And you love Indian food, but what if you were going to cook something? What is your best dish you can cook?
I'd say a chicken curry or some kind of meat curry or a biryani.
Okay.
I feel like those are my go-to
That's
dishes.
the
Go-to dishes.
Okay, so that's a bit about who you are. Now, in terms of why I really wanted to invite you on to be on the Legacy podcast, so some of the guests we've had on this podcast are older in years, right? So they're looking back on when they became a Christian a long time ago, or the fact that they've worked with students for such a long time and they've seen all this happen with students. That's not quite true for you in terms of you being at the latter stages of life, looking back, right? You're in your Jesus years.
I am indeed.
You're in your early 30s.
32, yeah.
So you're still in that kind of zone where you are seeing, I'm imagining, some of the legacy of what you've invested in and in the lives of other people, but also you're looking at how you want to live. That's you leave a legacy, and also maybe we can reflect as well on the legacy of others in your life. Maybe let's start at the beginning. So you were born in India?
No. So I was born in Bahrain in the Middle East. My mum and dad were working there at the time. So my mum's a nurse, dad's a radiographer. They work for the Defense Hospital in Bahrain. So me and my younger sister were born in Bahrain when they were working there. And then we moved to India.
Are you the
middle child? So I have an elder sister. She was born in India. Me and my younger sister were born in Bahrain. And then, we moved to India when I was about 8. My dad, me and my younger sister and my older sister, we went back. My mum stayed in Bahrain and worked. So we as a family weren't all together for, I guess, most of my childhood in some way, because my elder sister wasn't with us. Early years. And then we moved to the UK.
Were you Christian growing up? Were they Christians?
Yeah, so my parents were, would be Christians. My experience of, my memories of church growing up was, church was on a Friday in the Middle East. So that's when they had off, or that was their weekend.
Like a holy day.
Yeah. So that's when churches would gather in the Middle East. So we would go to church on a Friday. And I remember I think one of my first early memories is being one of the three wise men at the Nativity, being like draped in my mum's sari, walking down, following the star. Like that's one of my core memories of church. So church was a big part. My parents were keen in making disciples, which I wasn't aware of at the time. But looking back, I just saw how much they had people over and looked after them. So that was our experience growing up. So church was a big part. And then when we moved to the UK when I was 11 years old. And that was the first time we were all together as a family. So we moved to Liverpool. My mum got a job in the NHS. I was a nurse, and we all moved with her. And pretty soon after, my dad started a church in our living room.
Hang on a second. Let's two things I want to explore there. You moved to Liverpool.
Yeah.
So you grew up in Liverpool.
I did.
From aged
11.
I know there's an accent in there that's wanting to come out, right? Is there?
There is. And
but you're holding it back.
It's not necessarily holding it back. I'd say my accent is shaped and formed over the years. So I can do a Scouse accent if I wanted to. I could do the whole podcast.
But if you go to watch a game in Anfield,
I would be the most like it will be fully back.
Yeah.
So even like I remember.
You're resisting it now.
It's everything inside of me wants to go. Do you know what I mean? Like I do want to, but I'm just gonna for the sake of Anyway, but grew up there fully. Me and my sister would be like as Scouse as we get.
Yeah.
Thick, strong Scouse accent. And I guess for me, I just imitate. I pick up where I'm around. So we've moved around a little bit, but moved there when we were 11. Scouse as it comes.
Great. And then you said your dad started
a church. And my dad was an associate pastor of a church in India. And when we moved here, he just went, oh, well, we want to create a space for Tamil Christians in Liverpool. And that started in our living room. So on a Saturday evening, if we met anyone at the Tesco or an Aldi who was from India, he'd be like, come over for dinner, we'd love to have you. And then we started, I guess, meeting a few families. And before you know it, our Saturday evening, our living room was packed with people sat on the floor, reading Bible, worshiping Jesus together.
So good.
And we outgrew
and these are Tamil speaking, and for those people who didn't know this already, there's many languages in India, right?
Yeah.
So just explain that a little bit.
Yeah, India has many different states. Each different state has different languages. The national language would be Hindi, which most people will be aware of. Tamil, interesting fact, you'll love one, is the oldest language in the world.
Is it?
Tamil is the oldest language in the world.
Yeah, you knew I'd love stuff like that.
You would love stuff like that.
Yeah.
So Tamil is the oldest language in the world. So many of the languages have derived from Tamil. So we would speak Tamil. So people from India, South India would speak Tamil, Sri Lankans. Some Sri Lankans will speak Tamil as well. So we would have in our living room, then congregation, as we rented a church building, people from South India, but also people from Sri Lanka who would speak Tamil. So.
And you speak Malayalam as well?
I do.
And did you grow up speaking that? Did you speak English growing up when you're in the home?
Yeah, in the home we would speak Tamil.
Yeah.
So with my mum and dad, even now when we go back, when I'm with them, we all speak in Tamil at home. We went to an English school when I was in India, so I knew English, could speak relatively okay, I guess, English. Malayalam is another South Indian language that I've just picked up since being in the UK. So I could always understand. Some words are similar. But most of my friends, when I moved to the UK, growing up early years, were all from that part of India. And just being around them, hearing them speak, I've just picked it up to the extent where I could fully understand and communicate to them in Malayalam. So.
Okay. So he planted this church in Liverpool, and then that began to grow. That was your experience. Why don't you share a bit about your parents and the impact they've had on your life and their investment into you, and I suppose that will speak also to that cultural piece that so many people will relate to as well.
Yeah, huge. So much of what they do, you were not aware of when you're in it. I think it's probably true when you're growing up as a teenager. I think I was probably more frustrated with them than anything else. Like, can I buy a PlayStation? No, you can't. Can I get the train? No, you can't. That's so much of my life was that, not really understanding. And I think the older I got, I realized the spiritual investment they had made in my life that I didn't fully grasp.
Yeah.
I've recently shared the story as well. Like my mom, to this date, I'm 32 years old now, to this day, at 3 a.m. in the morning, will get up and pray pray for
Every day?
Every day.
3 a.m.?
3 a.m.
Wow, that is next level. I'm interested, does she go back to bed?
She does go back to bed after.
She goes up for an hour or so.
3 to 4. Sometimes it might be a little later, but without fail, an hour in the early morning, she would pray. And she, for most of her life, has done night shifts as a nurse. And so during a night shift, she would just pray during the night. So it's just got into the rhythm of praying. So like having a praying mum, I can't explain the impact that's had. So much of it I'm not aware of.
Right.
So much of it I didn't fully grasp. But
when did you first start to see this? At what stage in your life?
When I was in college. So when I was in college, I remember being up late one night because I had to submit an assignment the next day. Didn't quite, left it to last minute. Let's just be honest.
That's heavily relatable. You've had to do an all-nighter.
I've had to do an all-nighter to finish. It's a 9 a.m. submission. So I'm up, sat, I'm doing my assignment, I'm typing away. And around 3 a.m., I can hear like noise from the next room. So I'm going, what's going on? And I hear my mom praying. Wow. Name by name. She's like, praise for our family, praise for the world, praise for our family back in India. Like she's specific, names each of us, our siblings and our church family, people who've asked her to, would you pray for me for this particular circumstance?
Yeah.
Just goes at it. And I remember sitting there going, wow. Like I knew she was a praying woman, but I never realized the impact of that. Or I remember sitting in the room being deeply moved, hearing her prayer.
So good. It's like very moving to hear like the unseen legacy or hidden legacy of a praying mum.
And I don't think until later on in my life when my journey took a massive change, I don't think I realized the full impact of that. And I think so much of my story ended up the way it did, and I'm still here today, is because of a praying mom. You know, and I don't think I would have realized that when I was going through some of those seasons in life when I thought, this is too tough, I'm done, I'm out. I think having a mom who was stood in the gap for you and for her children and has gone, God, I'm declaring your truth over my children. They will be the ones who love the Lord, who will seek you, will follow you. And to the extent now, she would see 3 children passionately in love with Jesus, living a life that in some way honors him, and in the best of their ability, using their voice, their gift to build this kingdom. So I'm like,
that's a great legacy.
I love it. And she's sown in tears.
Yeah.
She's sown in the secret place in tears. And for years didn't see anything.
Yeah. Okay, so it wasn't quite going as she would be praying it would. So tell us about that. So you last time we picked it up, you were doing an all-nighter in college.
Yeah.
So then what happened in your life?
And then I go to university. And for me, university was a chance to get away from home. Again, strict Indian parents, naturally.
Yeah.
Very disciplined. Not a lot of things were allowed or permitted in the house. So for me.
Where do you go to uni?
Leeds.
Yeah.
So and then I lived in Wakefield. My sister was living there.
Okay.
So I lived with my sister in Wakefield and would go into university in Leeds. But Leeds was a chance for me to break the shackles off a little bit. Bear in mind, I'm still living with my sister. So it was limited in terms of what I did. But in university, I could just be whoever I wanted to be now for the first time. So.
And who did you want to be?
I just wanted to be free. And I didn't really know what that meant.
Right.
So growing up.
Choosing probably. You wanted to choose whatever.
I just wanted to choose. I could just choose to do whatever I wanted.
Okay. So a bit of rebellion.
Yeah.
Or a lot of rebellion. I don't know. Some rebellion.
Rebellion to the extent I still went home to my sister's house and no one knew what I was doing.
Oh, okay. So the family were not aware?
Absolutely not.
Like on a Sunday, you're presenting as Aaron got it all together, pastor's kid at Nayagam.
Yeah.
But week in, week out, what's not being seen is there's another life, a dualistic thing.
100%. Okay. And I feel like for so much of my life, I lived a dual life. When I was a teenager, I struggled with lust. But that would be Monday to Saturday. But Sunday, I was in church and I'll be the one on the drums, packing up
Yeah.
the cable, setting up everything. I was the one. And people would go, like, look at, and I'd be like, yeah. The model, pastor's kid who loves Jesus, but Monday to Saturday, not in a good place with God at all, or didn't even have a relationship with Jesus. So it was that. So in university, it was the same, Monday to Friday.
So how long does this carry on for them? Then you're in Leeds, you do your degree.
I did a degree in computing.
Yeah.
So the option for an Indian household is IT or engineering or medicine.
Okay.
I very quickly decided I'm not doing that. Wasn't smart enough to do that anyway.
Okay, so you picked IT.
So IT, I had a career path set. Going to be, get a job in IT. Networking came naturally. I was like, okay, this is the career. Plan and path is set. We're off on this journey.
Yeah.
Did a placement year in London. Worked for a company called Impact, which is a Cisco networking partner company.
Yeah.
Absolutely enjoyed it. Was getting paid a lot of money.
Yeah, like IT is the business
IT is
to
the
go
business.
into.
And I'm here. And they loved me that they went, listen, Aaron, go finish your final year, come back, you have a job. We're in.
Yeah.
But on paper, the best year, right? You're undergrad, you haven't even qualified yet, but you're on this placement job in London, you're getting paid, you're getting put up in hotels, expenses covered. I was doing projects all over the UK, travel covered, getting to eat in restaurants. And I'm like, this is the life on paper.
Yeah.
Reality, I was so alone. I would say that year in London was the hardest year of my life.
Wow.
Up until a grief that our family went through, that would be the hardest year of my life. I struggled with mental health. I used to have anxiety, panic attacks. I used to self-harm. It was like a painful journey.
Wow.
But yet no one was aware.
Right. So you're still hiding this lie.
Massively. So in my room, I'd be closed behind the door and like having panic attacks that no one knew about, or anxiety, the thoughts that would spiral. And I've had moments when I've stood at train stations waiting to take a train and going, oh, maybe this is it. Like, I just can't do this. And a few factors were at play. Like, I was in a really unhealthy relationship at the time. I was at a job that was quite stressful and demanding, and I was alone, and I felt so isolated. And I had all these good things, but didn't really have people to do it with. So it felt pointless. So yeah, and that was for me the turning point in terms of coming back from that placement year in London. 2014, October, everything changes.
So this is like 10 years ago now.
This October, the 11th will be 10 years of this particular moment.
So what happens then?
My final year of university, I go back to Leeds and I meet up with a few friends, 6 guys who decide to meet in my friend's house in Sheffield for just a weekend together. No agenda. We're just going to hang out. All of us were Asian, except one. I was Tamil, most of them were from Kerala in India, and then one was African. So 6 guys in my friend's house, no agenda. I brought my Xbox. People, we just wanted to hang out for the weekend. We played football, played FIFA, ordered pizzas, just chilled.
Just mates hanging out.
And then I remember at night just sitting there, and people started sharing about their journey. And people, like one of my friends just started sharing with like his journey of struggling with addiction to porn. And my jaw dropped. Because for the first time in my life, I was in a space where I didn't have to pretend. I could just be, I could take off my mask and say, I struggle too. I didn't have to have it all fixed together. I could actually say it without being judged. And that was the big thing. It was, I won't be judged. People understand, and we get to do this together. That was the first time I was in a moment going, I could actually say this and not feel bad. This crippling fear of what will people think and how will they see you? Because especially in an Indian community, honor and shame is huge. Yeah, I couldn't bring shame to my dad and his ministry.
If I express what's really going on,
I would bring shame to the family.
Yeah,
and in that day, I would say I experienced something of what I would find language to experience now is like maybe a personal revival. I met Jesus. He stepped into my story. I've grown up knowing him. I've learned the Bible stories, Sunday school, all that stuff. But in that moment in my life, Jesus stepped into my story.
Yeah.
And everything changed.
Just spend more time in that moment. What does it look like for Jesus to walk into that moment with you? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. Anyway, people start talking about this. Others start talking about like the immeasurable love of God in our life. Like that God would love us, that he would come. And then someone picks up a guitar and starts singing, like it just becomes a moment that's unplanned. It just becomes natural. We go into time of worship. And I'd say it was around midnight at this time. And the best way I describe it is this. It wasn't some like audible voice. It wasn't, often when we describe these moments, it feels like ethereal. It feels like unattainable thing. It just felt tangibly, the only way I can describe it, it felt like heaven was on earth. It felt like the cloud filled the room.
Yeah.
And it felt like I could feel God's love for me so tangibly. And I felt him just say to me, I love you.
Wow.
I know all of it. I see everything. And I love you. And I wept the whole night.
Wow.
Like all 6 of us in this living room in Sheffield, across the floor, like laid face down because God was here. And it was a night that we would never forget. But for me, it was a turning point. Everything changed. And more than just him loving me, he broke my heart for a generation. I still cry when I think about the reality of sons and daughters walking away from home. It breaks his heart. And that in that night in Sheffield, I got a glimpse of his heart that breaks for young people walking away from church or hurt or lost. And I remember that night going, I'm in. I don't know what it looks like. I've got a job, I've got a career lined up, but I'm in. And over the course of my final year, I ended up deciding IT wasn't the plan. So,
can we just talk a bit about the prodigal thing a little bit more, in the sense that I grew up in an almost entirely white church, in the Church of England, and there was always an awareness that you might not grow up to be a Christian. Like that was almost, I would say, almost like to the detriment of the parents,
right,
who could have been a bit more intentional. Not my parents, I have to say, they were pretty intentional, but and even then I managed to walk away from it.
Right.
Anyway, but I think a lot of parents had a kind of quite a loose attitude to the fact that their kids might grow up to be Christians, and hopefully they will, but maybe they won't, because it's just quite normal for that to happen. Would you say, I don't know if you would or not, would you say that growing up in an Indian family and coming from that background, that that's less of a thing? Like it's assumed you're going to continue the faith.
Massively. Yeah.
But I'm wondering whether then there isn't such a intentional preparation for the transition to adulthood. And
not at all, because you're right. Like growing up, it was a given that this is it. We're going to follow Jesus, and this is like, it wasn't even, you didn't even wrestle with doubt. This is what we believe. We're going to go for it. So when you come to those phases of your life where you're wrestling, and people found it hard to be in a congregation where they couldn't wrestle, because this is what we believe. We're going to go for it. You're born up in a Christian family. Why would you doubt? Why would you have questions about all of this stuff? And and there's a whole different lens on this of like gender, in terms of like my cultural identity, being in this place where am I an Indian or am I British? I've been born here. I have in my school or my college, all of these people, they act like this, but my home, I have a different culture. And then in the midst of all this, where does faith sit in? Is a transition phase of life that most first generation, migrants into the UK, or first, if they're born here from a different country, would always wrestle with. And the church isn't, or hasn't always been, really good at helping people transition that well. So what happens is assumed. And so what happens when people hit that point, they leave the church. So like me, when they get to university age, the first thing they want to do is get as far away from home.
Right. So what can we do to help, Aaron? Because like I'm not trying to tee you up too cheesily about student link up, because obviously that's a big thing that Fusion do, and we both work on that together.
Yeah.
But seriously, how do we help churches who are coming from that place to sort of basically wake up to this? Like, what do you want to say to them?
I would say to any church leader or church watching this now, every young person that you have in your congregation right now needs to be set up to be disciples for the long haul. And university is a key. And university will be super important for so many of these households because education is so important. So we will have an emphasis on studying well. But I think it's even more important that we tee up young people to be disciples of Jesus in their time at university. And the second part of that is, I think the church, if I was to say to the South Indian church in the UK, or generally, if I was to say to the kind of the church as a whole, I would say the church needs to be at the forefront of welcoming students who are coming to university. They need to be the ones welcoming, discipling, and loving students. For churches that are sending young people, it's key that we set them up for what is the most pivotal season of their life. They're going to be they're going to study and share space with people from all walks of life. And in the university, they're going to be rubbing shoulders with the future politicians, policymakers, your doctors, your engineers, your lawyers, and people who are going to have impact in media, arts, and society. And your children are going to be one of them. How do we give them the most important thing, which is the gospel and the truth of a relationship with Jesus in the most formative years of their life? And I think often we've dropped the ball, or I'd say the church has dropped the ball in that. And for me, I'm like, my heart breaks when I'm seeing young people walk away from church, especially when they've been part of church growing up, South Indian or South Asian or whatever ethnic community. And they get to university and go, I'm done because I've had an experience of church that doesn't sit well with me. And I'm like, no, but how do we create spaces for people to wrestle and ask
to doubt
and create space, and that's okay. So that when they get to university, they're in the church community, they're plugged into a local church in the city, and parents aren't sitting at home going, fingers crossed, I pray now my son comes back, my daughter comes back as a Christian.
Yeah.
Like, please,
like
God.
The worst roulette wheel ever.
Right.
Why would you risk on that?
Why would we take a risk on our children's eternity?
Yeah.
Not their career and their destiny, on their eternity. Like, that's what's at stake. I'm like, why would we take a risk? Fingers crossed, hopefully they find a church. Hopefully they find some godly friends. Hopefully they'll find a church community. Why would we play a game with their eternity?
Yeah.
And I'm saying, let's get them plugged in to a church.
So let me ask it this way. I understand the shame honor thing that you explained.
Yeah.
And you have done such an amazing job at honoring your parents, right?
Right.
That's crucial.
Yeah.
However, if I was to say, would you, if you have children of your own, would you parent them in exactly the same way? I'm guessing you would say, maybe not quite.
No, yeah.
So what would you do differently? And I realize you'll want to do that in an honoring way, but what would you do differently in order to set the next generation up?
Yeah, really. And I think before I answer that question, every generation has gone a step further than the generation before. So I look at my mom and dad and go, the way they've raised me, their parents probably won't agree with. They won't. It will be stuff that my mom and dad's parents would say, there's no way you should do that. Give that level of freedom. So every generation in some way is taking a step forward. But I think the thing that's important for our kids is this. I would say if I one day raise my own children, the importance of knowing their identity in Christ, and also creating space for wrestle and doubt, that they could wrestle, they could ask the big questions and not be ashamed. That I think creating safe spaces for conversation and questions will be one. And the second thing is this. Often, growing up, naturally, we've tried to put My parents have shared their heart for what they want to see happen for me, or they would have had an agenda of, how they saw my life out working. And I think my life is far from that. I think I'd say now they're really proud of who I am and what I do. But my journey to this point is probably not ideal. But I'd say we've got to, in any way I can, I would want to walk with my children or that generation to help them figure out who God is calling them to be, even if it doesn't make sense for me. Like, how do I back you to become all that God has for you, even if it doesn't align with the timeline I might have had for you? And I'd say, how do I create safe spaces, but be in rhythms of prayer or, spiritual disciplines? How can I give you a framework, but really release you to go and step into all that God has? Those would be some things that I might do differently.
And because you've had to live life in a different rhythm and to a slightly different tune to what they'd have thought, and you didn't become a doctor or a top IT guy or whatever, you've probably had to rely on the support of God, about the provision of God. Tell us a bit about what that's looked like.
It's wild. So I left university without a degree.
Hang on. I thought you said you studied.
I did study.
Yeah.
I got to my final year, in which October 2014, this moment happens. Across my final year, God said, I'm inviting you to an adventure with me. So across my final year, I realized very quickly IT is not for me. And I think I need to go on a Jesus adventure. I was kind of hesitant of full-time ministry as a tag.
Right.
So Jesus adventure, I like.
You could cope with
Jesus adventure.
And Jesus told you, sack off your degree.
Jesus said, come follow me.
That's a better invite.
It's a better invite. He said, come follow me.
Yeah.
And I had so many people say, just get a degree. You could always have a job to fall back on.
Yeah.
And I remember reading when Elijah he gets a prompt from the Lord to go and commission Elisha. And so Elijah goes and sees Elisha, who's plowing the land and is on his cattle, is working. And as he puts his cloak on him, Elisha's like, give me a moment, I'll follow you. He's like, you can do what you want. And Elijah goes off. But Elisha's response is this. He kills the oxen. He breaks his plowing tools, sets up a burnt offering, gives it to them, and then off he goes following Elijah. And I remember reading that going, Elisha follows Elijah with no safety net to fall back on. There wasn't a family business to come back to.
Yeah.
And I felt the Lord say, Aaron, would you follow me without a degree? Which, in an Indian community, which prides itself on education and having a degree and being someone who does that, it was a massive call to take to say, I will follow you, even if I don't have a certificate at the end or a degree to my name.
Did people say you're just bumming out, basically?
People said I was for lack of a better word, people said I was an idiot.
Yeah.
People said I was being a fool. They said, I had even someone say, you're wasting my tax money.
Wow.
I had someone look at me, and when I say someone, family, said, you wasted my tax money. And someone said, do you know how many people would give millions to be in your position to get a degree in a university in the UK? And you wasted my tax money.
Ouch.
Yeah.
And to be clear, your life message is not to say to every student, like, don't bother finishing your degree.
That isn't what I'm saying.
Like, it was about obedience in that moment. You felt that's what Jesus' invitation to you was.
To me was, come follow me with no safety net.
Okay.
So I'm not saying to anyone, leave university.
So you did follow him.
I did.
And then tell us a bit more about the provision you've seen.
So come follow him is an exciting invitation. Until that August, you're sitting in your house. I was in Liverpool at the time. And you've got bills to pay and no job. And pretty quickly I realized I can't do this without God's provision. So August comes, and I still remember this moment, and I could, I remember getting a call from HSBC. I bank with them, other banks are there. I bank with HSBC. Other banks are available.
Banks are available.
There are other banks.
I love how you shouted that
We
out.
just need to name that.
Yeah.
Other banks are available.
Aaron Nayagam, always helping out other banks.
HSBC called me and say, we've just noticed you've had no money coming into your account for the past 3 months. And you're on like a significant amount of overdraft. And you don't have overdraft in your account. So you're getting charged every day for being in overdraft. Are you okay? And I said to this guy, yeah, I'm fine. I'm just in this transition phase. Don't have a job at the moment, but I should have my account in credit by the end of the month.
Yeah.
And then this person says, okay, if you can get your account in credit by the end of this month, I will cancel all the charges.
Really?
You don't have to pay any fees. Just make sure it's in credit by the end
Wow.
of this month. I'm like, okay. I cut the call.
Yeah.
And now I'm going, where am I going to get this money from? And I remember going to and locking my door, getting on my knees in my room in Liverpool, and just literally going to God, you called me. You've got to provide.
Wow.
You called me, you've got to provide. I don't know what I'm going to do. I'm not going to go crying to anyone else. Like, you asked me to come. You said, follow me. I'm here. I need you to provide. Look, within the space of a week, I checked my app on my phone for my bank, and my account's in credit for £300. So I was minus 200 or something. I'm in credit for £300. Quick maths, that's about 500 odd quid that's coming.
Yeah, that's, yeah.
Thank you.
I can track with that kind of maths.
That's kind of, yeah, quick. 500 odd pound that's come into my account. My
Yeah.
immediate thought is, my parents, being the way they are, have noticed I'm just sitting at home. I don't have a job. And I've taken this decision. They put some money in my
They've been
account.
kind.
They've just been kind. They've been generous. So slowly I'm going to dad like, oh, did you put money in my account? To which he would go, do you think money just grows on trees? Do you think we've got money just to give you? I didn't give you any money. I was like, okay. So I log in on my online banking, not my app, but now on my, just to check where it came from. Look, a random check in my name, deposited in a random location. It's not like I've got friends there or anyone. Random check deposited in my name for an amount of 500 or something in my account. And when I tracked it, it was the day after I had prayed. Still to this day, I don't know who it was. I don't know why I got that money.
Yeah.
But that moment I realized he provides.
He provides. And so this relationship with prayer, you got the praying mum earlier on. Then there's you going, wait a second, I prayed. I love the way you prayed, by the way, when you just recounted that story. Like, you called me, which is such a biblical way to pray, to remind God who he is, what he did, how he interacted with us, and then to ask him to provide. You've done this. You better, like, it happens all the way through the Old Testament.
It does. And I'm like, oh, that is his invitation. Like, we get to do that. We get to pray in that way. And prayer has shaped me in these past 10 years because I've had to live dependent on the one that's called me. So that, and up until I had joined Fusion, my life was depending on God. So people said, would you get a part-time job? Like, why don't you get a job at a Mackey's or a coffee shop or whatever? I said, I would. I'm so ready. Like, I don't have pride to go and do a job. I can go and do a job anywhere. But he hasn't told me to. I can only do what he's asking me to do.
So why did you say yes to working with Fusion then?
No, when I met Fusion, I remember thinking, number one, why do I keep meeting these people? Number two, I feel like we've been doing the same thing. And here's a bunch of people who are going for the things of God. And then I looked at the website and it said, you have to raise your salary. And I went, God, if I'm meant to be here, you have to provide. Like, this has to be you. And this is not just like money appearing in my account. Like, I have to raise my salary. And I had prayed this having met Joe and Rosie over the space of a few months, who used to be on staff. Well, Joe is still on staff, leads Spain, Fusion Spain. So I met them, and Joe invites me to a weekend away, a calling weekend, we used to call them. Miriam puts these weekends on where she invites young leaders from across the UK. I met Joe, she invited me. I walked out going, I'm not going to this. I'm not going to this. Why would I go to a house in the middle of Tring to be with a bunch of people I don't know? I'm not going to go. But I remember looking at the Fusion website and looking at what they were passionate about. And it was students. It was the next generation. For me, it was the next generation. And it was the local church. Yeah. And I was going, this is it. The church is the heart of what we do. And it was about a next generation. And I remember going, God, if I'm meant to be here, you need to provide. From that moment to me going to the calling weekend, I had two friends, irrespective, they don't know, no one knows I'm thinking about Fusion, call me and say, I've been praying for you. And I know you're going to say no, but I feel like I should support you financially each month. So I'm going to set up a direct debit for money into your account. And I've done it already from this month. And I remember going, okay. You have no idea what that means to me right now. Okay, bye. Didn't tell them anything. So I came to that weekend away in 2017, January, knowing God had called me to Fusion, but I didn't know what it would look like.
So good. Aaron, tell us a bit about what Fusion's been like for you. Why are you still here after 7 years? And when I say still here, I don't mean, why are you still here, man? I don't mean it like that. I mean, like, what has kept you?
Yeah.
Because you could have done a few years, gone, student ministry is exciting. I worked with some great young leaders for a bit, and then I've gone on and done something else. What's kept you in it? Why are you still passionate about students?
I want to start that by saying I have had moments when I thought I'm done. These 7 years have been deeply refining and challenging. I've seen so much of God and seen so much of his kingdom at work. And actually, I think I'm a different Aaron Sahir now than the Aaron who started 7 years ago. And partly what's happened is I joined thinking I was the son who was going to inherit this move that we've been talking about. Revival is coming. We're on the cusp. We're going to see something happen with a generation. I joined Fusion thinking I'm the one who's going to see this. I think I've gone on a journey where I realized I don't think I'm the son who's going to inherit it. But I think I will be the father who comes alongside the next generation in order for them to see it. So that's one. The second thing is this. At moments when I've said I'm out, I think I'm done. I don't know, this is getting too much. I've gotten a glimpse of what the Lord is doing with students. Whether that be with stories, whether that be through testimonies, or just seeing with my own eyes the redemption of students and what it looks like to see them on fire for Jesus. There's no greater place. And I would do anything, like if someone said, Aaron, for the rest of your life, all you could do is, if you could just do one thing, what would it be? I'd say I'd give everything I have to play a small part. It doesn't have to be significant, whatever way. I would give everything I have to play a part in seeing a generation meet Jesus and be on fire for God. I'd give everything to see that happen.
Your number one in the list of two you just gave me is around the transition being like a son of like, maybe I'm going to see this, to being like, oh, maybe my job is to facilitate the next generation to see this. Do you think that is basically an appropriate posture for every leader to hold? Is to be like, actually, we are fathers and mothers that are releasing?
I think it's to the detriment of the next generation if we don't do that. So in Chronicles, David realizes Solomon's the one who needs to build the temple. So David says, Solomon is young and inexperienced, but the work that he has to do is of great magnificence and splendor, as in Solomon will build a temple that will be of great splendor for all the nations to see. And then the second part of that verse is this. It says, David made extensive preparations until his death. And that for me, since the start of this year, has been a life verse. I think I will need to make extensive preparations for a temple I will not see. I will need to give everything now for something that's not for me to hold or me to be attributed to. The temple is Solomon's to build. What we are seeing now is for Gen Z to hold. Fine. But it does require a David to make extensive preparations. So the way I say to anyone listening, any leader, we need to take that position, because if you imagine a relay race, we're running the third leg. And we're still in the third leg right now. So we can't tap out now. We can't say, well, it's going to be them. They're the ones crossing the line. Let's just, no. We need to run.
You got to give them the baton.
And we've got to give them the baton. And there is a window to do that. Give it too early, you're disqualified. Give it too late, you're disqualified. And knowing when the window is to release a generation to step into all that God has, that's what God is calling us to. So I would say it is to the detriment of a generation if we don't play our part. And I would also say this. Our part doesn't have to all look the same. So we don't all have a similar role, but we all do have a role. Whether you are a grandma praying for an hour a day, whether you're a church leader who says we need to prioritize students, we need to welcome them, Where you're a student, where you're a parent who's driving your child to university and says, actually, I'm going to do that, but I'm also going to commit to praying. I'm going to give, I'm going to give to people, getting Bibles to the hands of Christians who are going to come, right? I'm going to sow in financially. I'm going to sow in prayer. Whatever our role is, it could look different, but we all have a role to play. So my invitation has been this all year, and you're probably sick of me saying this, is we have to be all in. We have to be all in. And the all in is going to look different.
I don't think I'll ever get sick of hearing you say that, Aaron. And you are all in. You are someone who is just fully committed and all in for seeing this happen. Just try and describe a bit more for us of what you're praying for and what you're hoping we will see with students happening. Maybe some of what we're just about starting to see as well. Describe some of that.
I think what we are seeing, I would say, the early signs of what we would find language to articulate as awakening in this generation. Now, my heart longs to see sons and daughters come back home. The lost found, redeemed in who they are, and they're finding their identity in Jesus. And not just that, absolutely burning for the Lord. Like the hunger that we're seeing now, and that word is everywhere. That hunger that we're seeing in this generation is electric. It spreads like wildfire. And that hunger propels us to seek the Lord in a way we maybe have got comfortable not doing. So I think what we will begin to see is this. I think we will see Gen Z spearhead a movement in this nation that will look like them going all in. But that will be it will be connected with the whole body. So it will be intergenerational. It will also be cross-cultural. It will be the nations together. So my prayer is we will see a unity in the church like we've never seen before. In the midst of tested, tried, even contested spaces that we will go into, there will be a remnant that God will raise up in the UK. That will be set apart for the Lord, consecrated unto him. And they will say, we will contend and lay down every idol. We will break anything else that takes precedence over Jesus. And we will put him on the throne and we'll seek him. And in doing so, we will commission and release a generation to be all in for Jesus. And they will see their friends come to know the Lord. So we're going to see mass baptisms. We're going to see churches overflowing. We're going to see it. We're going to see baptisms by the beach in their hundreds. We're going to see it. We're going to see the stories increase exponentially of people having dreams and visions about Jesus. It's going to go. And I think the church, I guess my challenge and invitation to the church is let's get ready now for what is to come. Because if they all rocked up today, we're not ready. So how do we create spaces to disciple and mentor and champion young students now as they step into what the Lord is inviting them into?
One of the things you mentioned just there is the unity within the church.
Yeah.
Earlier on, you spoke about you growing up in Liverpool in a Tamil-speaking church, and there will be people watching and listening where they're like, "Wait a second, like what? If there's a church in England, though, why isn't it just in English?" And they won't be trying to be racist or anything. Right. They just don't know. They've not come across that. Yeah. So it'd be really helpful if you could explain a bit of that. But then also maybe can you speak as openly as you feel able to do about the current situation with the church in the UK, the opportunities that face us to be able to be unified, to understand one another across all sorts of ethnicities and diversities.
For sure. God's church is gloriously diverse. Heaven, one day when we're all there, will look beautifully diverse and rich. Every nation, tribe, and tongue is that image that it paints in Revelation. So that is the image of God's church. Now in the UK, that church exists. It's spread out across the UK. Nations gather and worship in their own language. And you go, why? Because it is a space for people to come and be who they are. So why do we need a Tamil church? Because people can worship in Tamil and read the Bible in Tamil. And they get to sing to Jesus in their own language. And I'll be honest with you, I love worshiping in English. But I am moved to tears every time I sing songs in Tamil. Because the way the words are and the meaning of them is so much richer and deeper than the words are in English. So there's something about worshiping in your mother tongue. Now, often in the UK, we are unaware of the churches that are in the city. You might be part of a big, Church of England church or an established church in the city, resources or whatever. If you just did a Google in whatever city you're in, you'd be surprised the amount of diaspora or intercultural churches that exist in your city already. People who meet in community centers or sometimes rent church buildings in the afternoon and will do a service because people are looking to gather. And then we go, well, where are the spaces for unity? Prayer. It's so simple. There might be so many things we disagree on. There might be. Let's not even go into theological debates that divide us. There's a million different things we can put in between all of us and go, I'm on this, you're on that. But something we could gather together to pray, to see God's kingdom come. And some of the spaces where I've seen deep unity happen is when we put aside our agenda and we've gone, we need to gather together, submit ourselves and say, actually, God, forgive us. And we want to seek you. And I think the church in the UK will be so much richer by coming alongside its brothers and sisters from different nations. Because we will see a facet of God's nature that we haven't yet seen because we see it. You will see it in me and I will see it in you. And it was true for me growing up in the South Asian church. I saw a nature of God when I was around white British people who worship Jesus that I just hadn't seen before that. And it gave me a picture of Jesus that was more rich and beautiful than what I'd seen before.
Yeah.
So and I think it's true the other way around.
Yeah, absolutely true the other way around. And that, to be honest, that's interesting to hear because we sort of joke about the food style where I'll be like, I really love Indian food and spicy food and all that sort of stuff. And we kind of joke around how the English offering is something incredibly bland to you. And like, how, have you gone out for the blandest meal that you're able to eat? But with regards to faith, I've also found that level of interest and intrigue and passion. And I'm drawn to what I see in your faith, right? I was going to ask, are you drawn to things? Or is it the same in the white church, right? Are you looking there going, oh, that's so bland? Or what are you thinking? That's inspiring. That's a bit more of Jesus so that we all learn off each other.
Growing up in India, praying for 40 days was normal. Fasting for 40 days was part of our church rhythm.
Yeah.
So now in my marriage, now in our family, when we have rhythms of prayer and fasting, it isn't massively different to what I've grown up with. So even when I was in the UK, being someone in high school, we would have the churches we were part of have 40-day fasting prayers where the people would gather in the church and pray for 40 days. And they will sit from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m. No one would eat anything. That was normal. And then I saw the Western church. And prayer and fasting probably wasn't the priority of an agenda. Or people, I love Brendan Lehman's quote, if you want to see where God is, turn up to the prayer meeting of the church. You'll see the reality of what God is like. But what I did see is this. I saw the church practically meeting the need for some of the prayers they were praying. So I realized in the East, we pray. We don't often go.
Right.
In the West, we go, but we don't often pray.
That's so good.
So I'm like, isn't it amazing that we could come together and go, we need to pray in order for us to go.
Yeah.
But also we can't just pray and sit at home. We've got to be the ones that go as well.
Yeah, yeah.
So I'm like, there's something rich about going, let's contend and pray. But also God is often making us the answers to some of the prayers that we're praying. So God, we want to see revival in our city. Well, I haven't actually knocked on my neighbors. Yeah. And I've not had them around. You know what I mean? Like that's the challenge. Yeah. Whereas justice and serving the city and community comes so naturally to the Western church. But they are lacking in prayer and contending. I think that's changing. The tide is shifting. But I think that's happening as we become one in God's body because we realize, actually, you're strong here, Luke. I want to come with you. I want to learn. You will make me sharper. Yeah. And then you go, actually, let's keep walking together in this direction because the more we keep doing that, we refine one another. We become sharpening to each other. And in who God has called us to be, we then become the fullness of who we are, even if we've been around people who are outworking it differently.
Got it. Yeah. And we're both involved in helping to make the send happen.
Yes,
and that's going to be a great coming
It'll be
together.
amazing.
I remember when we were at the early stages of Wondering That and chatting with John McGinley about this, whether it would happen or not, and whether we needed it, right?
Right.
And that was one of my questions to him was, do we really need another event?
Yeah.
And he said, yeah, great question. And it's one of the questions that, generally speaking, white church leaders ask.
Yeah.
But BAME church leaders are asking that question, or whether we can get people to come because they're used to praying through the night in the stadiums.
Right.
And they fill them. The question is, then what happens? That was their question, which actually is a much better question, to be fair. But yeah, as we come together, I can see exactly what you're describing. It's a beautiful picture. So you've mentioned Jesus throughout this. I would love you to just tell us what you love about Jesus. And imagine someone's listening who's like, I don't really know about him. I like this Aaron guy. He seems all right. So I've watched this podcast. But he's talked about Jesus and I don't really know him. Who is he?
Jesus is the most significant figure in all of human history. History sits on his life, death, and resurrection. And every single one of us, we by default find ourselves far away from God because we're born in what the Bible calls sin. We are born in a fallen world. We're messed up by default. He would give up everything for the sake of us coming back home. And I thought I was too far gone. I thought there was no way back for me. I thought I had messed up too much. And every time I sit with any young person who says, Aaron, this gospel is great. I mean, Jesus sounds like a great person, but not for me. I would say, you have no idea how far he would come. You have no idea the extent he would go to in order to seek the least, the last, and the lost of society. That is who he is. Heaven would give its most prized possession for the sake of me and you coming back home. That's Jesus. And he knows us so intricately. He knows me, and he knows how I'm wired. He knows how he needs to meet me. And it'll be so different to the way he does that with you because he knows you and he knows how you're wired. And so we will all have different experiences and encounters with Jesus, but it will be personal and it will be intimate and it will change our lives. And I don't know of a single person who's met with Jesus and has stayed the same. And I don't think I will ever meet one. Now, he doesn't promise easy. Because you go, wow, Christians have it tough. They do. He never said, come and it'll be easy. But he did promise himself. He said, follow me and I will be with you till the end of time. So I remind myself, I'm living right now with unanswered prayer. I'm living with questions and hurt and pain at times. And I've gone through seasons of grief and wrestling with the big questions that any person would who doesn't yet know Jesus. But I would say, because he is with me, I have something called peace that surpasses everything. That even living with the reality of things that I have not seen come to pass, I know one day it'll be okay because I have him. That is Jesus. And he loves us and he knows us and he wants a relationship with us. Yeah.
I love that. If you can, why don't I just get you to speak to students in the UK that are wondering about, they feel like they're maybe spiritually waking up. This is one of the things we're seeing, right?
Yeah.
There's some kind of awakening happening. Students who are having dreams about Jesus, they're becoming wide awake. They're like, oh my goodness, how have I not seen this? Why have I never been told about this?
Right.
They're coming alive. If you could speak to someone in that moment, like almost, why don't you speak straight down the barrel of the camera and just speak straight to them?
If I could say one thing to you, what I'd say is this. Holy Spirit with you means you have everything you need. And God is calling you, commissioning you, waking you up to more of Him and for more of what He has for you. And my simple encouragement and invitation will be this: seek the Lord, pursue Him, obey Him. Go where He goes, do what He tells you to do, and we will see God do incredible things with us. He will choose to do it with us. So if people are experiencing, or those students watching now, experiencing this sense of an adventure with Jesus and He's calling you to come, I just say, follow Him. It will be the greatest adventure of your life. And there's so much of God's kingdom that we're yet to see happen. So.
Great. Before we finish, and I'd love you to pray for us as we finish. But before that, just answer this, will you?
Yeah.
If your life was a prayer, like a lived out prayer, what do you think and hope the answer to that prayer would be? In other words, what's your legacy, do you hope?
That the Lord would do immeasurably more than we can ask or imagine with what we have, if we were willing to put it in His hand. So my prayer, if my life looking back would become a prayer, it would be, the broken, messed up pieces of my life in your hand have a much greater impact than whatever I can decide to do with it in myself. So I'd say, Lord, do what you want to do. Amen.
So good. Aaron, can you pray for us and we'll finish?
Yeah. King Jesus, we thank you for who you are. We just even in this conversation are aware of your lordship, you being seated on the throne, that you are king and you reign. And I just pray for each person watching this in the ways they needed the most, whether they are experiencing something of an awakening and their hearts are stirred, hearing what is possible. I just pray, Lord, that we would be a people who seek your face, that we would contend in prayer, we would sow in tears, we would sow seeds of faith that we would dare to believe will come into fruition. God, thank you. You're the Lord of the rain. And God, we are believing for rain to come. And I just pray for people who need it the most in this moment, would you meet with them? Holy Spirit, thank you that you are near. We love you. In Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Aaron, thank you.
Thank you.